All right, in this video, we're gonna recreate the Gucci website hero inside of Framer. So this is actually gonna evolve my skills both creatively and technically as a designer and as a developer. So I wanna show you how to recreate this website so we can look at all the nuanced details, challenge ourselves, and really kind of dissect what makes this website actually so good. So we're building this to learn and to expand our skill set and our tools so we can take this and apply this to our own designs and not just copy the Gucci website. If you wanna follow along, you can grab the images and the logo from the Gucci website itself, or you can grab them in the link in the description below. Same thing for the finished Framer remix file. That'll also be in the description below. So if you're ready, let's dive in. All right, so I have the Gucci site here, and the first thing I want to do is actually right click and inspect this site and get basically an understanding, a lay of the land of first and foremost, the layout. So like spacing, sizing, stuff like that. And then any nuanced details of image effects, animation, stuff like that. So I clicked inspect and I can click on this element here, the element selector. And if I hover over anything, I can actually get an idea of all the sizing. So here right away, I can see that this div is 1440 pixels wide. And this is a common size that I design at. And this is basically the max width. But the max width itself is actually 1312 in this logo here. You'll see that we have the 1440 number, but we have inside here the 24 pixel and the 64 pixel padding. The 24 pixels is at the top and the 64 is on the side. So 1440 minus 64 on each side, minus 64 again, is 1312. So that's going to be our max width for the container and the 24 pixel padding above and below. Inside of the menu here, we have a bunch of icons, and inside here, the actual SVG is 16 pixels. And then the container for the SVG is going to be 24 pixels. And the spacing here, it's using padding, 24 pixels on the left. So it's actually the same size of the icon, is the same size as the space beside it. We don't have to use padding. We can use gap inside of Framer, but just looking at the spacing itself, we're getting these numbers. This is using the 8-pixel grid system, which maybe I'll make another video about that, but highly recommend using it. And we have our icon here for the menu. And beside it here, we have the text. And this is 12 pixels and it's all uppercase. It's Gucci Sans Pro, which we don't have, but we can use Outfit, which is a pretty similar font from Google Fonts. So this is kind of just the lay of the land. And if I scroll, you'll notice that I'll just unselect this. The logo obviously gets smaller and sits in the middle of this container. And also we get a contact us button that appears here, and the background, we get the red background. So that's pretty straightforward as far as this hero goes, just a nice little subtle animation. And the other couple nuances here on load, we have this image kind of fading in or scaling in, and then we have the text and these buttons kind of appear, and the hover states in the buttons. The background is getting smaller, but the text stays the same. And font size, we have 12 pixels here. This is going to be the same size at 12, and then I can't get a font size for this easily, but we'll just say 32 pixels. Looking at the responsive behavior of this, before we even get down to like tablet and mobile, I'm just looking at the desktop. What I'm looking at here is how this actually is filling the height of the browser, and it's not filling a viewport height here. It's actually locking an aspect ratio of this image. So that's important to note. And if you inspect here, you can actually find at some point, you'll see there's an image aspect ratio. Here we go. We have aspect ratio 16:9. So we can use this as a container for the hero. And then as you scale down, not only does the image ratio change, but the image changes itself, which is pretty cool. And the aspect ratio here is 2:3. So we can use this as a container. And with that being said, we have this aspect ratio. If I make this just a responsive ability here and drag this in, you'll notice that if the height doesn't take up the full viewport, or if the image is taller than the viewport, and you scroll, this text is actually sticky in the bottom until you get to the bottom of the container. And then our mobile, we also lose the text, and the contact us is gone as well. So this isn't overly complicated. It's relatively simple, but it's good to actually inspect this and get an understanding of the actual spec that was built, and again, learn from this. Okay, so we have our blank canvas inside of Framer. And the first thing I'm going to do is add a breakpoint for the tablet and the phone. And go into the desktop. I'm just going to start and copy the desktop image for the hero and paste it in. You click and drag this image around and it'll stay there. Sounds fun. It's not what we want to do. We want to go onto the top level container here for desktop. We want to make it a layout, and we're going to choose stack and direction up and down. So by default, this is good. This is basically behaving now as a website should. The content is starting at the very top, and then everything else is going to flow beneath it. And the height here is 1,000 pixels still, which we don't want. We want this to be fit. So that way the page is only as tall as the content inside. We also have this image that I dropped in, and the width is 1,000 pixels, and it's a locked aspect ratio to 562. I'm just going to double check this. If I do 16, it is 16:9. So that is the same ratio that that container was. So we can work with that ratio. And then again, I'm going to set this to fill, and you'll see that the aspect ratio keeps the same regardless of the size of the screen. Okay, so we have our image here, and let's just type in the text here of the title. So if you tap T and click anywhere, we can do Gucci together for Valentine's Day. And we'll leave it red for now, but you'll see that I can also click and drag this anywhere, which is not really what I want to do because this text is inside of a frame. And when it's inside a frame, there's no layout applied to it. So what we want to do is make this a layout. We can hit plus here, and we're keeping that same aspect ratio. And if I set the distribute to the end, it's now on the bottom. And the padding, let's set it to 40 pixels all the way around. And let's just click on this text here. And 32 pixels is fine. We'll set the text to white, and the font, we'll set it to outfit. So this text looks good, and we have this image container. So let's see what happens when we hit preview and we drag this up. It's actually not giving us that effect where that text is always sitting at the bottom. So what we want to do is make this sticky, but we're going to put other things in this container because we have the buttons. We want those to be sticky too. So I'm going to just hit Option Command Return, or right click and hit Add Stack. And now this is inside of a stack. And now we can set the type here to sticky. And what this is going to do is make sure it's always visible in the screen until it kind of gets taken away. But we actually want it to be sticky to the bottom, not from the top. So I'm just going to right click on top, hit remove, and hit bottom. And we'll do 40 pixels, which is that same distance that we have in the padding. So if we preview this, you'll see that it's still not working. And the reason for this is because we always want the overflows in the parent containers to be visible. Otherwise, the property of sticky doesn't work. So if we do this now and scroll, that text is always going to be visible inside of that container and then behaving as we want to. Okay, so let's make the buttons now. I'm going to duplicate this text, just Command D, and I'm going to right click and hit create component because we want to be able to reuse this button because there's at least 2 instances of it. So we'll just call this button, and we're going to grab this text. We're going to change the size to 12. We'll set the transform to uppercase. The weight can go up a notch to medium. And you'll see that this is kind of just chilling wherever I drag it. We want to make sure that this is a layout here. So it's a stack. And the height of those buttons is 48 with a width. We can do fit and then set that padding, those 24 pixels, I believe. And we have this red background color. So I can click on this and grab the hex code. But I don't want to set it as a background to this component because this is actually going to, I want to scale just the background. So I'm going to create a frame instead. So tap F, drag anywhere. And this is inside of a layout, so it's going to kind of look broken for a second, but I'll paste that fill. And we'll set the type here to absolute, so it can be independent of the layout. We'll center it, and we'll set the width to 100%. So this is the background. We'll call it BG if we want to, and you'll notice that it's covering the text. So we can fix this by setting the Z index to 0, and this text style, Z index, say 2. Now it's above. And we can add a hover state. And the background, we can add a transform to scale. If we go to the inspect here and we have this button, I can click on the hover property, go to hover, and I can actually just search for scale. And we'll see that's actually 0.95 and 0.9. So we'll use one of those values. So if we go back to the home and we'll fix this, we'll just set this width and height to fit. Then it'll just take on the properties set in here. So that background is now scaling. Obviously, the text we need to change. So instead of setting it inside of this component, we're actually going to make this a variable. And we'll just call it label. And we'll set the text here. So one is for her and one is for him. And inside here as well, we can set a link on this component, make that a variable, and we can set that here. So we'll just set this to placeholder for now. And we want these two buttons to be beside each other. So we can just put these in a stack here. And by default, it'd be width fill. So we can actually make this, keep it to fill, but we'll set the direction to left and right and leave 16 pixels. And if we preview this, now that text is, or that whole container is behaving how we want to. The spacing might be a bit different. This text in particular, this container was a bit tricky using the inspect, but that's 32. And 16. Just this gap here is 32. Okay. So we'll name these buttons. This will be content. And you'll notice that we actually had on the load, we have this image appearing. So let's just click into this and see what we get here. So we have a couple things. One is we have a brightness of 0.9 to actually darken it. But on the load, we had some scaling as well. So here you'll see, because I had scale filtered already, we have a transition scale 1.2 seconds and then some measurements on the animation. We can actually just copy this and use this inside of Framer. Because this image is on the background of this desktop, if we add an effect on here, it's actually going to do this whole container. So what I want to do is copy this fill and actually remove it from here. And I'm going to make a new frame and just click and drag. And I want to keep the same aspect ratio. So I'm just going to do 16:9 and lock it. We'll set the fill to that same image. We'll just paste it. And if you go fill for the width, this is not what we want. We want this to be background image. So we'll set the type to absolute. And we'll set the position to be the center. And then just go back to the width here and make sure it's 100%. Okay. So now it's actually behind all the content here. And just anchor this 0 to the top. And now it's still behaving as we did. But what I can do now is actually add an effect for appear. And we can have this do something custom here. So the scale set is 1.2 and then 0.5001. So scale is 1.2. And then for the animation, it was ease. We can put those values here, 0.5001. And the time itself is 1.2 as well. And sorry, the scale being of 1.2 is here. It just happens to be the same thing. And we also said the filter had a darkness on it, or brightness of 0.9. So we can do that here. Just darken it a bit for more legibility. And let's see. Okay, so what's happening now is the scale isn't being cut off, and also we don't have a darker background here. So if we load this, it actually loads on that red. Or sorry, the opacity doesn't come in. So we can remove the opacity effect. By default, it always sets it to 0. And we can add another frame here and lock the aspect ratio and set the overflow to hidden. And we'll call this image container. And now this is taller. It gets cut off there. Okay. And then the other thing, we noticed that the max width here was 1312. So I'm just going to apply it to this container, even though it's probably not going to be wider than that. It still is for safety. And then we can look at the phone version of this container, which is just a different image and the aspect ratio. So let's go back and take this container here of the content, and we can add a max width. It's fixed to 1312. And this padding here is 40. I'm actually going to add the 64 to the sides, and the 40 is just kept for the bottom and the top. That's just consistent with the rest of the layout. And then as we get to phone, this text is an issue because it's set to fit. So we can go back to the desktop and set it to fill. Set the alignment to the center. And the padding here, we can drop this down on the hero level to 24. And see that the sizing here changed a bit, I think, because the content possibly. So if we drop this font down to say 24, that hero is back to the original sizing. And drop this to 24 as well. Okay. So to get the new aspect ratio of the 2x3, I'm going to make a new frame, set the width to 2, the height to 3, lock it. And this width here is 390. So we'll do 390. And 585 is the value. So on the hero, we can set the height 585, lock it again. Image container 585, lock it. Same thing here. And then we can go and copy this image and paste it. Now it's that same effect. And then for the animations, so we can use these properties now to as a basis. So opacity 0 is fine. Y, we can do, say, start with 24. And the ease, we'll set those same values. So let's just copy this effect and paste it on the buttons. And we can just add a delay of 0.8. Okay, and then now we can add the navigation. So considering all the elements on here, basically the scroll state has all the elements on it, and then obviously the position changes and the sizing. But we can create this, all these elements using phosphor icons. So as I said before, these are 16 inside of a 24 container, 12 pixel font size, 24 pixel gap. We'll call that 24 pixel height. And then a plus here, same thing, it's 8 inside of a 16 container. Okay, so let's start by just dropping in phosphor icons. So insert phosphor, and we'll put this at the very top level. And we said we wanted this to be, say, 16 pixels. And first one is a shopping bag, so let's do shop. And obviously these aren't the real icons, but a very easy way to make this in Framer. And we're going to make the frame, the parent frame here, 24 pixels. And go back here to make sure this is still 16 and centered. So this is following that same format of a 24 pixel container, 16 pixel icon. And the size here, we can lock that. Inside, we can make these black, and I'll leave the weight for now. But if I can duplicate this a couple times, we can just go in and click the different names. So user, magnifying glass, list. And obviously we want all of these to be going left and right. So let's just put these in a stack here. And we're going to set the direction left and right. And the spacing we said was 24 pixels. So this will be icons, and I'm going to rename these. The last one, we had menu here. So just tapping T, typing it in. And we said it was 12 pixels black. We can add a text transform, make it uppercase, and make that regular again. And put these in a stack. We'll set the width to fit and the gap here to say 8. And then as we scroll, we have the contact us as well. We'll duplicate this and make this a plus. We said that was 16. And inside here, the sizing is a bit different, obviously, like per icon set. So I'm actually gonna make this like 20 just to better fill that compared to the live site. And I can duplicate this menu here by just hitting Command D. And this is contact us. We will remove the text transform and put these two in a stack together. Set the width to fit and the gap here to 4. You can move this over. And we actually want these two to be kind of edge to edge. So I'm going to take this out of this stack here and put them in a parent stack. Direction to be left and right. And the distribute, we can actually do space between. So it's always going to be kind of edge to edge. But this is a bit broken. This is set to fit. This is set to fill. So we can actually make this fit. Now it's going to be edge to edge. We want this to be a max width of 1312, this container. So we can add a max width here, go to fixed 1312. And we can put this in another stack and make this padding on the outside, make it 64. So I know this desktop is only 1200, but if we were to drag this out, you'll see it ends here at 1312. Okay, so the height of this is actually, we'll see if it's a fixed height versus not. So this is actually just 24 pixels, but then as you scroll, this header here is going to be 72 pixels. So we have two options here. We can either make it a fixed height, or we can actually add the 24 by 24. And we'll see that the height is equal to 72 because we're using this 8-pixel grid and everything is exact precise height. So we want this bar to be over the image and not just starting at the top. So if I put this inside the hero, it goes away, mainly because of a Z-index issue. Make this 9, you'll see that it shows up here, but it's not really what we want it to look like. So we're going to take this back out of the hero section and actually going to make this fixed. And it's going to be attached to the top. So now it's always going to be at the very top. Even as we scroll, always touch to the top. And I made it black, but obviously this can be white. And the width, it sets itself to a fixed value when you change it to fixed, the type to fixed. So make sure it's back to 100%. And the text here, I'm just going to make this all white. Okay, and now let's paste the logo in. So I'm just going to copy this SVG and I'm going to paste it inside this navigation here. And obviously this is not what we want to happen. Let's just set it to say 24 pixels right now so we know like what it would look like in the scroll state. But even this is wrong because we want this to be always in the middle. So if we were to keep it in this view, we could actually just set these widths to fill instead of space between here. So we can set this to start or center. And then just align this first one to the start and the second one to the end. And then now it's basically, they're all taking up the available space, pushing the logo into the middle. So this is a better setup for this. But we also want this logo to be bigger when you land and then shrink down. But you'll see when I scale this up, it's kind of messing with this logo, or sorry, the layout a bit. So this isn't how we actually want to build this navigation. Let's just rename these real quick. So just to clean this up and be more organized, let's just name this navigation, max width, be kind of clear what the content or intention of this is. This would be contact, this would be icons. And then the logo, I want to take out of this and actually just make a new stack with the contact and the icons. And we'll set this to center as fine. So name this items. And put above the logo and set the max width actually up and down. Okay, so if I set this to fill, the SVG handling in Framer right now is not great. They're working on it. It's going to break. So I'm going to add a frame here. And this logo is inside the frame. The aspect ratio, I want to lock it. And the logo inside here, I want to set to basically just 100%. And center that. And then now with this frame, I can scale this. So if I do 100%, it's going to scale properly. We said the padding here, we had like 24 above, and then the gap was at 10. So let's just set this to 24. Or sorry, inside here, this is the gap. So we can remove it here just to not be confused. So now the spacing on this looks good. And we just need it on scroll to go smaller and go up in the middle. I'm going to, just for the sake of like testing, I'm going to make a new frame and put it underneath the hero. And I'm just going to make this 100 VH. And it's going to be a lot easier to like just force a scroll. So now this comes easier. The logo here, we want to use a scroll variant to change the position of this. So we're going to have to make now a component out of this navigation. So now what's great is that it carried over the desktop, tablet, phone. And here, we just want to make sure that this is set back to 0 at the top. Width is 100%. We're in good shape. So desktop, we have the contact us is going to disappear on the initial state here. So I can actually hide this. And let's just make a new version of this where the logo is going to be smaller inside of here and contact us is actually visible. So we'll go back to contact, turn this on, and the logo here. How do we get this smaller and inside of here? Because you can't just take this frame and move it inside of here and set the height to say like 24, because that does it everywhere. You can't move the nesting of layers in Framer for each variant. So what we want to do is take this frame, I'll call it logo, and change the position to absolute, like the type. And then now we can set a hard pixel value of say 24 pixels. And because it's in this max width container and this is set to fit, it's 24. The position of this is actually relevant, or it's actually relative to the max width container. So this being set to 0 is actually going to line it perfectly inside of this container. So we have our desktop, and then I can name this desktop scroll. And what we want to do is create a new effect and go to scroll variant. And we can do layer in view. We want to do section in view. We'll do layer for now. And we want to go from desktop to desktop scroll. And we'll do start at the top of the viewport. So we play this. You'll see that it's transitioning, but obviously we don't want it to just do this on load. So what we can do is make a section to trigger this on scroll. So I'm going to tap F, just drag this bar out, and we'll drag it out to the top. We'll set the position type to absolute, and the top position, basically this is how far the user is going to have to scroll to trigger this animation. So typically I just do like 8 or 16 pixels as soon as that scroll starts, basically. The width, this doesn't really matter. I'm just going to do 100% and 1. I'll remove the fill and set the ZX to -1 so you can't see it, but it's still here. And then the scroll section, I'm going to add one and call it nav-trigger. and I'll paste this here just for organization. So then on this navigation now, I can go to scroll variants and I can do section and view instead. The viewport, so when this section here reaches the top of the viewport, which is 16 pixels away, it'll change from the desktop, which it's currently at, to desktop scroll. So now it's happening only on scroll. The animation, we can take this desktop one and we're going to do that same, following that same format of that ease, 0.8 or 1.2. And it was 0.5001. And on scroll, we had the background come in that was red. So I'm going to copy this red color because I'm not setting up styles for this. And go inside this navigation. And I'm not going to set the background here. I didn't mean to set that to 0.9, by the way. I'm not going to set the background here to the color. So if I do, you'll see what happens. It kind of like grows with the logo, which is fine, but it's not really what they do. They do something kind of similar, to be honest, where it does like shrink a bit, but I don't love that effect, but we can still recreate it. Where instead of having the background change, I'm going to just create a new frame inside this desktop breakpoint here. And we'll set it to absolute. We'll set the top to 0. Set the width to 100%. And we said that height of that navigation was 72 pixels. And what is that red color? Center it. Set this index to 0. And the opacity on this first one, we're going to set to 0. And then here we'll set it to 1. And if you hit play now, it just fades in. You could do this in different ways where if you wanted to, you could set it to, say, come in from the top. So it'd be like minus 72. Sorry, minus 72. And then desktop would be, or the scroll state would be 0. Like this to me feels a bit nicer, to be honest. But if we're just recreating it, we can still just make this 0. And we can make the original height like 80 if we want to do that same effect that they're doing. And then the second height would be 72. And we also want to make sure that the overflow here is visible. So you'll see that there's that subtle, like, kind of shrinking as you scroll. We didn't have any hover states except for the contact us. We had just that little rotation. And I feel like probably a heavier weight for the text too. If this gets in your way, you can just lock it, right click and hit lock or Command L. That way you can easily get this text here. And I'm going to increase the weight on this too. And to get that hover state, I'm going to make this contact a component. So I'm actually going to update the primary here. And let's create component here. We'll set it to fit. We'll fix the layout in a second. And the radius here, the rotation, sorry, is going to be, I think it does 360. No, it's 180. Oh, wait, no, just 90. Okay. And then here, you want to make sure this is set to fit still. And we can just add links here as placeholders. Make sure it's always visible, only in the second one. Okay. And then on the phone, we said that the menu text was gone and this logo on the scroll state goes to the top left. The padding here as well on the left and right, we'll set it to 24. And then we'll make a phone scroll state. The tablet we can get rid of. I don't think it actually changed on tablet. Can do the same thing. Just set the height here to 24 and the left to 0. And I think the spacing here can probably come down. So what happened here is that we don't have the right scroll variant set. Yeah. Oh, I changed the gap only on one of these here. That should be 16. And then the background, we can set this to visible or set the opacity down. And it was the same height, I believe, at 72. And then we just want to make sure that all the overflows are set to visible just to avoid any accidental cropping. Even the contact us, if you wanted this to be fade in, you can set the opacity to 0 in the beginning and then set it to 1. It's a bit cleaner. Yeah. All right, that is the Gucci website recreated in Framer. If you have any other ideas for videos, drop it in the comments below. And don't forget to check out my master classes for web design and Framer, both on Flux Academy. See y'all soon.